Welcome to Health Freedom Radio with Jessica Steele and Jordan Fisher. Whole health conversations to elevate your life, your health, your wealth, and your legacy. Learn with us, then share with others.
What if the reason you're, tossing and turning and staring at the ceiling at 11 p.m. has absolutely nothing to do with your bedroom?
Right, or even your evening routine.
Exactly. I mean, what if the root cause of your inability to sleep tonight actually started, 14 hours ago?
Based entirely on what your eyes were looking at the exact moment you woke up.
Right, and that completely flips the conventional narrative on its head, doesn't it?
It really does. I mean, we are so conditioned to think of sleep as this isolated event that just happens in the dark.
Yeah, like it's disconnected from the rest of our day.
Exactly. When really, it's the final domino in this massive chain reaction that begins with the morning sun.
And redefining that entire chain reaction is our mission for today's deep dive. We're exploring this really profound framework for understanding human rest.
We are, and we're drawing extensively from the work of Dr. Tia Jolie Phillips, specifically her book, Deep Healing Sleep Naturally.
Yeah, along with the foundational principles from the Terrain Code, plus some really incredible ingredient research we've been looking at.
But before we get into the heavy biology, there's a specific, really personal note from Dr. Phillips addressed to the reader.
Which means it's addressed directly to you, the person listening to us right now.
It is. She wrote, and I quote, "Your body asked me to do you this favor, so I brought this information forward for you."
Oh, wow. I just love that. It totally changes the entire texture of the conversation.
It really does. It removes that, sterile clinical weight of a typical medical discussion.
Yeah, and replaces it with this genuine human care. It takes something that often feels like a frustrating medical failure.
Like this idea of insomnia being a broken part of a machine.
Right, and it turns it into a hopeful journey instead.
Yeah.
Because the central premise of her work and of our deep dive today is that deep sleep isn't some mystery you have to solve.
No, it's a biological condition that you have to create.
Which is such a powerful shift in perspective. When we look back at our great-great-grandparents, they just intrinsically understood how to create that condition.
Yeah, it's simply by the way they lived. I mean, they were naturally aligned with the intense brightness of outdoor sunlight.
And the absolute pitch blackness of night.
Exactly. And the seasonal availability of their food and the heavy physical demands of nature.
They didn't have to read books on circadian rhythms, right?
No, because their entire lifestyle was just a masterclass in circadian alignment.
Meanwhile, modern life has essentially engineered a lifestyle that actively fights every single one of those natural rhythms.
We really have. We spend our days under these dim, artificial ceilings.
And then our nights staring at intensely bright, glowing rectangles.
Right. And we eat highly processed food at 10 o'clock at night.
We sit completely still all day, and then we just expect our brains to shut off on command.
Which is biologically ridiculous. But modern science is finally catching up, providing the exact molecular mechanisms to validate why those old ancestral ways made such perfect sense.
Before we unpack all those mechanisms, though, we do need to establish a really clear boundary for how we're approaching this material.
Yes, that's crucial. We are not here to diagnose anyone listening, and we are not prescribing treatments.
Right, and we are absolutely not attacking the medical establishment.
Not at all. I mean, if you have a severe acute issue like a broken bone or a sudden infection, medical doctors are unparalleled.
Yeah, you don't try to fix a compound fracture with chamomile tea, you go to the emergency room.
Exactly. But when we're dealing with chronic lifestyle-driven issues like deteriorating sleep quality, we want to gently expand your worldview.
We want to move beyond that strictly pill-first mindset.
Right, moving away from the idea of just forcing the brain into unconsciousness and instead focusing on rebuilding the daily and nightly terrain.
So if we're going to rebuild this terrain, we have to fundamentally dismantle how most of us even view sleep.
Oh, absolutely. I think the default assumption is that sleep is just, time off.
Yeah, like a biological pause button. You park the car in the garage, you turn off the engine, and it just sits there until morning.
And that is probably the most dangerous misconception we have. Under the framework of the Terrain Code, we look at the internal biological environment.
Right, which is the sum total of your cellular chemistry, your microbiome, your nervous system.
Exactly. And this terrain operates on very strict economics of energy. Daytime is your catabolic state.
Catabolic meaning you're actively breaking things down and spending energy?
Correct. You're spending your cellular currency outward. You're moving muscles. You're processing stressful emails.
You're digesting food, fighting off pathogens, all of that.
Yes, and that catabolic state creates microscopic damage and massive amounts of metabolic waste. Nighttime, on the other hand, is your anabolic state.
So that's when the biological machinery switches gears, right?
Exactly. It invests energy inward to rebuild. This is when you synthesize essential hormones like testosterone and growth hormone.
And when your immune system catalogs the day's threats and builds antibodies.
Right.
Let me try to put that into a financial context. So if the daytime catabolic state is constantly withdrawing funds from your bank account.
Yes, a good analogy.
And the nighttime anabolic state is the only time you can make deposits. What happens when we constantly shortchange the deposit window?
Well, you run into trouble.
Like, if I only sleep 5 hours a night, am I basically just running up a massive biological credit card debt?
That analogy perfectly captures the mechanism. And biological debt accrues very real interest.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, because sleep is highly metabolically active. Your cells are consuming massive amounts of ATP adenosine triphosphate to fuel this repair work.
The literal energy currency of the cell.
Exactly. And if you shorten that repair window, or if the quality of that window is poor, the body doesn't just speed up the repair process to compensate.
It doesn't. What does it do?
It has to perform triage. It starts making really hard choices about what gets fixed and what gets deferred.
Oh, I see. So maybe muscle tissue gets repaired so you can walk, but neurological waste just doesn't get cleared out.
Precisely. And when that deferred maintenance piles up, it inevitably shows up as what we call symptoms.
Which is why I hear people say things like, I'm exhausted all day, but at 10 p.m. I'm suddenly totally wired and can't sleep.
Right. Or I fall asleep fine, but my eyes pop open at 3 a.m. every single night. Usually we label those as disorders.
But the terrain code asks us to view those completely differently, right?
Yes. Not as failures, but as highly accurate, honest communications from the body. Symptoms are just signals.
So take that classic tired but wired scenario. Your brain is exhausted, but your heart is racing and your thoughts are spinning.
That isn't a broken sleep switch. That is a brilliant physiological response to a nervous system that just hasn't been given a genuine off-ramp.
Meaning all that daytime stress chemistry is still just flooding the system.
Yeah, exactly. Your body is still circulating cortisol and adrenaline. The nervous system is basically looking around saying, we're way too inflamed to power down.
It's not safe to enter a vulnerable, unconscious anabolic state. We need to stay on alert.
Exactly. So the body is actually trying to protect you.
That completely reframes the frustration for me. If sleep is this incredibly active, energy-intensive state of repair, the obvious question becomes, how does the biology actually know when to switch?
How does it know when to transition from catabolic spending to anabolic repair?
Yeah. Exactly.
Well, the transition mechanism is a masterpiece of biology, and it actually begins with your eyes.
Okay, this is the part that completely blew my mind in the source material. The idea that tonight's sleep is anchored by this morning's light.
It's all about the master clock.
Let's dig into that.
Deep inside the hypothalamus of the brain, sitting right above where the optic nerves cross, there's a tiny cluster of neurons.
About 20,000 of them, right?
Yes, called the suprachiasmatic nucleus, or the SCN.
It's a long name, but let's break it down. Supra, meaning above, and chiasmatic, referring to the optic chiasm where the eye nerves meet.
So it is physically positioned to monitor visual input.
Got it.
The SCN is the master circadian conductor of your brain's orchestra. Every organ in your body has its own biological clock,
Yeah, like your liver, your kidneys, your gut.
Right. But the SCN is the conductor that keeps them all playing the same song at the same tempo.
And the primary baton the SCN uses to conduct this orchestra is light.
Specifically, it relies on a very specific type of light hitting specialized cells in the retina called melanopsin-containing ganglion cells.
And this is exactly why the first 30 to 60 minutes of the day are so critical.
Absolutely.
But wait, if I wake up at 6 a.m., turn on my bright bathroom vanity lights, and stare at my super bright phone screen, why isn't that enough light?
I mean, it feels bright to us, right? But the answer lies in the physics of light intensity, which we measure in a unit called lux.
Okay, lux.
The SCN requires a massive volume of light photons to trigger the chemical cascade of morning. A bright indoor room might only expose your eyes to, like, 300 to 500 lux.
So to our conscious vision, it seems bright, but to the SCN, it's basically twilight.
Exactly.
What about outside, then?
If you step outside on a heavily overcast, cloudy, just miserable-looking morning, you're still getting about 10,000 lux.
10,000. Wow.
Yeah, and if you step outside on a clear, bright, sunny morning, you could be getting upwards of 100,000 lux.
So just stepping outside is literally giving your brain hundreds of times more light information than sitting in your kitchen with the lights on.
Yes. And when that massive wave of outdoor light hits those melanopsin cells in the eye, they send an electrical signal straight back to the SCN.
And that signal acts like a biological reset button.
It does. It tells the body to spike your healthy morning cortisol, which is what actually makes you feel naturally alert and motivated.
And it completely suppresses any lingering sleep chemistry from the night before.
Right. And crucially, it begins the synthesis of daytime serotonin.
Which is huge because serotonin isn't just a mood neurotransmitter, it's the literal chemical building block for melatonin.
Exactly. You are physically building tonight's sleep hormone out of the raw materials provided by today's morning sunshine.
That is just incredible ancestral alignment. You are setting a 12 to 14-hour biological timer the minute you walk outside.
But the morning light is only half the equation.
Right.
We also have to address the other end of the day.
Which involves a pretty profound misunderstanding of what melatonin actually does.
Oh, massive misunderstanding.
To most people, melatonin is just a gummy bear you buy at the pharmacy and chew on when you're feeling restless.
Right. But framing melatonin as merely a sleep sedative is a massive underestimation of its role. Melatonin is a master hormone.
And one of the most potent antioxidants in the human body.
Exactly. When it's released, it scavenges the brain and body for free radicals, neutralizing the oxidative stress that built up during your catabolic day.
So it protects the structural integrity of your DNA, and it's basically the master coordinator of cellular repair.
It's not just knocking you out. It is the foreman of the night shift repair crew.
But to get that foreman onto the factory floor, the brain requires something very specific, which the sources call the darkness imperative.
Yes. So melatonin is produced in the pineal gland, which is a small endocrine gland deep in the brain.
And the pineal gland is incredibly sensitive to light inhibition, right?
Highly sensitive.
Yeah.
It requires absolute profound darkness to open the floodgates and release melatonin into the bloodstream.
And this is where the modern lifestyle creates just a catastrophic mismatch.
It really does.
Because if I'm staring at my phone or watching a bright television screen at 10 p.m., those devices are emitting blue-rich artificial light.
And those specific blue wavelengths are the exact same wavelengths present in midday sunlight.
Oh, wow. So while you're consciously trying to wind down, your eyes are sending a powerful signal to the SCN saying, hey, the sun is still high in the sky. Do not release the melatonin.
The research indicates this kind of late-night screen exposure can slash natural melatonin output by up to 40%.
40%. You're artificially eliminating nearly half of your body's most powerful repair chemistry just by scrolling through social media in bed.
It's staggering. But taking that a step further, the sources introduce an incredibly cutting-edge layer to the melatonin story.
Yeah, this part is fascinating. We've always thought melatonin only came from the pineal gland in the dark, right?
Right, but recent science reveals that our mitochondria, the microscopic energy generators inside our cells, actually produce their own local supply of melatonin.
They produce it to protect themselves from the exhaust of their own energy production.
Exactly, subcellular melatonin.
That is just wild. But if the pineal gland uses darkness to release its melatonin, how do the mitochondria trigger their own local production?
They use near-infrared light.
Let's break that down for you listening. Near-infrared light isn't the visible light we see, and it isn't the ultraviolet light that gives us a sunburn.
No, it's the invisible spectrum of sunlight that we actually feel as deep warmth.
Right. And because of its longer wavelength, near-infrared light has the unique ability to physically penetrate deep into human tissue.
Yes, passing right through the skin, into the blood vessels, and reaching the cells themselves.
And when those near-infrared photons strike a specific enzyme inside the mitochondria, I think it's called cytochrome 6 oxidase?
That's the one. It triggers a reaction that allows the cell to manufacture its own internal melatonin, protecting it from daytime damage.
Think about the ancestral context of this. Our great-great-grandparents spent 10 hours a day working outside.
They were constantly bathed in near-infrared light,
which allowed their individual cells to build up massive reservoirs of local subcellular melatonin.
And then, when the sun went down, they existed in total darkness,
allowing the pineal gland to flood the rest of the system with circulating melatonin. They had dual-layer melatonin protection.
They really did. Now look at the modern terrain. We spend our days inside, behind glass windows that actually block near-infrared light.
So our cells are starved of their local defense.
And then we spend our nights bathed in artificial blue light, shutting down the pineal gland's systemic defense. We have engineered a total circadian inversion.
It's no wonder everyone is exhausted.
Okay, so let's assume you're listening and you take this to heart. You get outside for 100,000 lux of morning light.
You put away your screens at 8 p.m.
You protect the darkness imperative. The pineal gland opens up, the melatonin floods the system, and you successfully transition into deep sleep.
Once we cross that threshold into unconsciousness, a highly mechanical physical cleaning process begins in the brain.
Right. We need to talk about the glymphatic system.
The discovery of the glymphatic system in 2012 by researchers at the University of Rochester fundamentally shifted our understanding of why sleep is non-negotiable.
Because for decades, neuroscientists were basically baffled by a major anatomical mystery.
They were. You see, the brain is a massive energy hog.
It counts for maybe 2% of our body weight, but it uses 20% of our energy.
And anytime you use that much energy, you produce a lot of metabolic exhaust.
Right, like a car engine. The rest of the body clears metabolic exhaust using the lymphatic system, a network of vessels that act like a biological sewage system. But the brain doesn't have standard lymphatic vessels. It is closed off by the blood-brain barrier.
So the big mystery was, how does the most metabolically active organ in the body avoid basically choking on its own toxic waste?
And the answer is the glymphatic system.
Which I just love describing as the brain's dishwasher. But it isn't a passive soak, right? It's a violent mechanical flushing process. How does it actually work?
It relies on a specific type of brain cell called a glial cell, which is where the G in glymphatic actually comes from.
Okay, glial cells.
During waking hours, your brain cells are tightly packed together, communicating rapidly. But when you enter deep, slow-wave sleep, the brain's internal architecture radically changes.
The glial cells actually shrink, don't they?
Yes, which causes the interstitial space, the fluid-filled gaps between the brain cells, to physically expand by up to 60%.
That visual is just wild to me. The brain literally shrinks its own cellular volume by 60% just to open up the streets.
It opens the streets so the street sweepers can get through. Once those spaces widen, the cerebrospinal fluid, the clear liquid that surrounds your brain and spinal cord, pulses rapidly through the brain tissue.
Riding the rhythm of your deep, slow heartbeats and delta brainwaves.
Exactly. It washes through the tissue, sweeping away the neurotoxic debris.
Including things like amyloid beta plaques, right? Which are the proteins associated with cognitive decline if they're allowed to accumulate.
Yes, absolutely critical to clear those out.
Okay, let me push back on this, or at least voice a question you listening probably have.
Yeah.
If I go to bed at 10 p.m. and my alarm goes off at 6 a.m., I was in bed for 8 hours, but maybe the room was a little too hot, or I drank a glass of wine, so I was tossing and turning, briefly waking up every hour or so. Am I still getting the 60% brain expansion and the fluid wash?
You are absolutely not, and this is a critical distinction. The glymphatic system is highly state-dependent.
Meaning it only operates under specific conditions.
It only operates efficiently during continuous sustained periods of deep, slow-wave sleep. When you experience microarousals, even if you don't consciously remember waking up, but your brain shifts out of deep sleep because of a warm room, a noise, or alcohol wearing off, the glial cells instantly swell back up.
Oh, wow. So the interstitial spaces just slam shut.
And the wash cycle abruptly stops.
So I might have been lying horizontally for 8 hours, but because my sleep architecture was fragmented, the dishwasher kept getting interrupted mid-cycle.
Which means you wake up the next morning with a brain that is literally, physically clogged with yesterday's waste.
That heavy, sludgy cognitive impairment we call morning brain fog, it isn't a lack of caffeine, it is the physical presence of uncleared metabolic neurotoxins.
Exactly. It's a structural terrain issue.
And to make sure this plumbing works, the body needs very specific structural support, right? The sources mention these things called AQP4 channels.
Yes, which are essentially the drain pipes.
And they mention a mineral requirement that totally caught me off guard, sulfur.
Sulfur is amazing here.
I mean, I always thought of sulfur as just that smelling salt mineral, or the stuff that makes hot springs smell like eggs. How does a mineral help my brain wash itself?
It's an incredible piece of biology. The brain cells are suspended in something called the extracellular matrix. Think of it as a three-dimensional scaffolding made of proteins and sugars.
Okay, scaffolding.
For this cerebrospinal fluid to flow effectively through this scaffolding and enter those EQP4 water channels, the matrix needs to maintain a very specific electrical charge.
And sulfur provides that charge.
Yes. Sulfur is the third most abundant mineral in the body, though we rarely talk about it. Specific sulfur compounds, known as sulfates, are embedded in the extracellular matrix.
And they carry a strong negative electrical charge.
Exactly. Because water molecules are polar, meaning they have their own slight electrical charges. This highly negatively charged, well-sulfated matrix literally repels and attracts the fluid.
So it's forcefully pulling the fluid through the brain tissue.
Yes, it creates the hydraulic pressure.
That is amazing. So if your diet is completely depleted of sulfur-rich foods, your extracellular matrix loses its negative charge.
The scaffolding essentially collapses, the electrical pull vanishes, and the fluid just sits there, stagnating.
You lose the hydraulic pressure needed to run the lymphatic system. It becomes a structural issue, not just a sleep issue.
Speaking of structural terrain, the research touched on a mechanical way to assist this fluid flow, simply based on how we position our bodies in bed.
Oh, right, the sleep posture data.
Yes. There is fascinating emerging data regarding sleep posture. Animal studies, backed by some observational human data, suggest that sleeping in the right lateral recumbent position, meaning on your right side, might be the optimal physical alignment for lymphatic clearance.
Why the right side specifically? Does it have to do with gravity and the heart?
It appears to be a combination of gravity, the position of heart, and venous return.
Because the heart is slightly offset to the left.
Right. Sleeping on your right side allows gravity to assist the heart in pumping blood efficiently without compression.
Which optimizes vagal tone, the activity of the vagus nerve.
And seems to offer the least physical resistance to the flow and drainage of cerebrospinal fluid out of the brain and into the lymphatic system of the body.
Sleep on your right side to use gravity to drain your brain. That is the ultimate biohack, and it's completely free.
It really is.
Okay, so we've established how to clean the brain. But the biological signals that tell the brain it's actually safe to initiate that deep, vulnerable state of slow-wave sleep, they don't always originate in the head.
No, in fact, one of the most powerful control centers is in the stomach.
Let's transition to the gut sleep axis. If my vagus nerve is the information superhighway connecting my gut to my brain, what kind of traffic is driving on it?
Traffic consists of chemical signaling molecules produced by your gut microbiome. Your large intestine is home to trillions of bacteria.
And when you consume dietary fiber and plant-forward foods, like legumes, vegetables, complex carbs, you aren't actually digesting that fiber yourself.
Yeah, you're feeding it to your bacteria.
And when they eat the fiber, they produce exhaust. But in this case, it's a highly beneficial exhaust.
Correct. The bacteria ferment the plant fiber and produce compounds called short-chain fatty acids, the most prominent being butyrate.
Butyrate.
Butyrate is a magical molecule for the human terrain. It heals the gut lining, but it also travels to the vagus nerve and binds to specific receptors.
Sending a literal upward electrical message to the brainstem and the hypothalamus.
Yes.
And what does that message say?
The message translates to, we have an abundance of complex nutrients. We are well fed and we are safe.
Wow. And when the brain receives that butyrate signal, it feels secure enough to begin powering down the sympathetic nervous system, the vigilance and threat detection networks.
This brings a whole new meaning to the phrase, food as information.
It really does. You aren't just eating calories to store fat or build muscle. You are sending a biochemical memo to your master clock.
Which means if you change the input, you change the memo.
So if I eat a massive, heavy, highly processed meal, let's say a huge steak, and refined carbohydrates, at 10 p.m., right before I try to sleep, what memo am I sending to my brain?
You are sending an emergency metabolic work order.
An emergency work order.
You are telling the body, do not shut down. We have a massive influx of complex proteins and simple sugars to manage. Keep insulin high, keep gastric acid flowing, keep blood diverted to the digestive tract.
You are forcing the catabolic spending state to stay online.
Exactly. But perhaps the most disruptive consequence of a late heavy meal is how it destroys your thermal descent.
Let's unpack thermal descent.
In order for the brain to transition from light sleep into that deeply restorative slow-wave sleep, your core body temperature must drop by about 2 to 3 degrees Fahrenheit.
It's a non-negotiable physiological requirement.
Yes. However, the process of digestion generates massive amounts of internal heat. It's called the thermic effect of food.
So your brain is trying to cool down the core to initiate the glymphatic wash, but your stomach is essentially running an internal furnace to break down that late-night meal.
And the furnace wins.
The furnace wins.
Your core temperature stays elevated, and the neurological gate to slow-wave sleep remains firmly locked. You might be unconscious, but you will linger in shallow, unrefreshing sleep stages.
Okay, so late food disrupts the thermal terrain. Let's look at the liquids we use to survive the modern catabolic workday, specifically caffeine.
Ah, caffeine.
I want to look at the cellular mechanics here, because if I drink a cup of coffee at 4 p.m. to get through an afternoon meeting, I honestly feel fine by 10 p.m.
You don't feel jittery.
Right, I don't feel jittery, and I fall asleep at my normal time. So why is that late afternoon coffee secretly destroying my sleep architecture?
To understand the illusion of caffeine, we have to look at a very specific molecule called adenosine. From the absolute second you wake up in the morning, your brain begins producing adenosine as a byproduct of cellular energy use. Throughout the day, this adenosine steadily builds up, floating around the brain and attaching to specific adenosine receptors.
I picture it like a fuel gauge on a dashboard. The more adenosine binds to the receptors, the further the needle drops toward empty, creating that physical sensation we call sleep pressure.
That is exactly how it works. By 10 p.m., your receptors should be saturated with adenosine, creating an overwhelming drive to sleep.
But here's the trick with caffeine.
Yes, caffeine has a molecular structure that is almost perfectly identical to adenosine. It is an imposter.
An imposter molecule.
When you drink that 4 p.m. coffee, the caffeine crosses the blood-brain barrier and slots perfectly into those adenosine receptors.
But because it's an imposter, it doesn't trigger the sleepiness signal.
Right. It just acts as a physical blockade. It acts like a bouncer at a nightclub, standing in the doorway of the receptor, preventing the real adenosine from getting inside.
So caffeine doesn't actually give you any new energy.
None at all.
It just unplugs the fuel gauge. The gauge on the dashboard says you have a full tank, but the engine is actually starving for rest.
It is entirely borrowed energy, and you will pay compounding interest on the debt.
Because while the caffeine is blocking the receptors, your brain doesn't stop producing adenosine.
Exactly. The real adenosine just keeps building up, waiting in the background. Furthermore, caffeine has a half-life of about 5 to 6 hours for most adults, and a quarter life of 10 to 12 hours.
Which means if I drink a coffee at 4 p.m., a quarter of that active caffeine is still circulating in my brain at 4 a.m.
Yes. And even if you manage to fall asleep, that circulating caffeine prevents your brain from accessing the deepest stages of slow-wave sleep. It chemically guarantees a fragmented, shallow night.
Wow. We also have to address the other widely accepted, completely destructive chemical sleep aid.
Alcohol.
Yes, the concept of the nightcap.
Alcohol is arguably the most deceptive substance in the sleep conversation. People rely on it because it is a potent central nervous system depressant.
If you have a few drinks, it will absolutely sedate you. It will knock out your cortex faster.
But we must clearly define the difference between sedation and sleep.
Right, because sedation is just anesthesia. You are turning off the conscious mind, but you aren't activating the anabolic repair machinery.
Precisely. And the second half of the night is where alcohol causes absolute chaos.
What happens in the second half?
As your liver works frantically to metabolize the alcohol, it converts it into toxic byproducts called aldehydes.
Okay.
To clear these toxins, your body produces a surge of stimulating chemicals, including a massive rebound of an excitatory neurotransmitter called glutamate.
Oh, so the sedative wears off, the brain gets flooded with excitatory glutamate, and you suddenly wake up at 3 a.m. with a racing heart and sweaty sheets.
And you have effectively eliminated your REM sleep.
Rapid eye movement sleep.
Yes, which dominates the second half of the night. This is when your brain does its emotional processing, trauma resolution, and memory consolidation.
But alcohol severely suppresses REM.
So instead of emotional repair, your body spent the night running a hazardous waste cleanup operation in the liver.
That is just brutal. Okay, let's pull back and look at the physical environment. Say my gut is sending safety signals because I ate a high-fiber dinner at 6 p.m.
My adenosine receptors are clear because I skipped the afternoon coffee, and my liver is happy because I skipped the alcohol.
Right. My internal terrain is perfectly primed. What happens if my external physical room is secretly sending threat signals? Let's talk about the biology of the bedroom.
In the terrain code, the physical space you sleep in is referred to as the sleep sanctuary, and it must be managed with absolute intention.
Because deep inside the brain is the amygdala, the primitive threat detection center.
The security guard that never clocks out, even when you are unconscious.
That's a great way to put it. The amygdala is constantly monitoring the environment for predators or danger.
If your bedroom is filled with subtle threat cues, the sudden hum of a refrigerator through the wall, the aggressive blinking blue light of a Wi-Fi router on a desk, or an ambient temperature that is too warm,
The amygdala refuses to stand down.
it keeps the sympathetic nervous system slightly elevated, whispering to the brain, keep one eye open, we might need to run.
The temperature factor is huge, by the way. The sources emphasize keeping the room between 60 and 67 degrees Fahrenheit to assist with that thermal descent we talked about earlier.
Yes, temperature is key.
But there is another environmental factor in the source documents that I found completely shocking, something almost nobody talks about.
The invisible buildup of carbon dioxide.
Yes, CO2.
This is a textbook example of how modern convenience accidentally sabotages our biological terrain. Over the last few decades, we have gotten incredibly good at building energy-efficient homes.
We use double-paned glass, heavy insulation, thick weather stripping to keep the heat or the air conditioning inside.
We seal the envelope of the house.
Exactly. But think about the physiology of sleep. You go into your master bedroom, you shut the door tightly to keep out noise, and then you and perhaps a partner spend the next 8 hours exhaling carbon dioxide into a perfectly sealed box.
And what actually happens to the air quality in that sealed box? The data is alarming.
What does the data say?
In a sealed bedroom with 2 adults, ambient CO2 levels can easily rise from a normal baseline of about 400 parts per million up to 1,300, 2,000, or even 3,000 parts per million by the early morning hours.
3,000 parts per million. And how does the sleeping brain react to breathing in that much CO2?
It reacts with panic. As CO2 levels rise in your blood, it causes a slight drop in your blood pH, making it slightly more acidic.
And your brain has specialized chemoreceptors that monitor this, right?
When they detect rising CO2 and falling pH, it triggers a powerful survival reflex to increase your respiratory drive. Your brain forces you out of deep, slow-wave breathing and into faster, shallower breaths to blow off the excess CO2.
So your body is essentially experiencing mild suffocation, and it forces you out of deep sleep to keep you breathing fast enough to survive. You could have a $10,000 mattress, perfect blackout curtains, 0 caffeine in your system. But because you shut your bedroom door, you are waking up exhausted because the air itself became a physiological threat.
Which is why ventilation is profound terrain medicine. The simple act of cracking a window just an inch, or leaving the bedroom door open to the hallway, or running a quiet fan to circulate the air.
Just keeping the CO2 concentration below 800 parts per million?
That can fundamentally transform your sleep architecture.
It's free and it changes everything. Now, before we actually get into that well-ventilated, cool, dark room, how do we prep the physical body?
Because we've all done the thing where we are frantically typing a stressful email at 10:30 p.m. We hit send, slam the laptop shut, dive into bed, and just expect to be unconscious in 5 minutes.
Biology does not have an emergency brake.
No, it requires an off-ramp. And the preparation for nighttime stillness actually begins with daytime movement.
Let's connect movement to sleep. We talked about the lymphatic system in the brain.
But the rest of your body relies on the standard lymphatic system to clear metabolic waste from your tissues.
And the lymphatic system doesn't have a heart to pump it, right?
It relies entirely on the mechanical contraction of your muscles and the deep, vacuum-like pull of your diaphragm when you breathe.
So gentle daytime movement acts as a literal pump, clearing the inflammatory debris out of your tissues so the body doesn't have to deal with it at night.
Yes. Physical movement pumps the lymph.
But what about the mental momentum, the spinning thoughts?
That requires active emotional downshifting. If you carry unprocessed cortisol and adrenaline from the workday into the bedroom, your amygdala will stay hyperactive.
The sources emphasize practices that provide closure, right?
Yes. This could be as simple as spending 5 minutes journaling or writing down tomorrow's to-do list to physically extract those responsibilities from your working memory, or engaging in a gratitude practice.
Those actions send a clear neurological signal. The work is done, the day is closed, it is safe to rest. Okay, up to this point, we have been viewing the terrain through the lens of modern endocrinology and neuroscience. We've mapped the mechanisms, the SCN, the AQP4 channels, the CO2 chemoreceptors.
Right.
But what I find incredibly beautiful is that ancient traditions have been mapping the behavioral patterns of these exact same mechanisms for thousands of years, long before functional MRI machines even existed.
It is a remarkable convergence. When we look at systems like traditional Chinese medicine or Ayurveda from India, or traditional yogic practices.
We shouldn't view them as mystical or as competing medical diagnoses.
No, we should view them as brilliant, highly refined observational frameworks. These healers map the terrain through generations of careful empirical observation.
Let's translate some of those ancient maps into modern biology. In traditional Chinese medicine, they utilize the concept of an organ clock, where different organ systems have peak periods of energy throughout the night.
Yes, the organ clock.
Suppose a listener says, I fall asleep fine, but I wake up abruptly every single night between 1 a.m. and 3 a.m. What does TCM say is happening?
In the TCM framework, the window between 1 a.m. and 3 a.m. is the time of peak liver energy.
Now, if we translate that ancient observation into modern physiology, what is the liver doing at 2 a.m.?
It is intensely metabolically active. It is clearing the day's toxins. It is processing lingering stress chemistry. And crucially, it is managing glycogen, the stored sugar needed to keep your blood glucose stable while you fast through the night.
So if you wake up at 2 a.m., it's not a random glitch. Your liver might be struggling to manage a blood sugar crash, or it's overheating from processing that late-night glass of wine, and that metabolic distress wakes you up.
The ancient map matches the modern mechanism perfectly.
What if you wake up between 3 a.m. and 5 a.m.?
In TCM, 3 a.m. to 5 a.m. is the lung meridian, which they often associate with the processing of grief, sadness, or deep emotional stress.
And physiologically?
Physiologically, this window is when the body initiates its early morning cortisol surge to prepare you for wake. If your allostatic load, meaning your cumulative burden of chronic stress, is overwhelmingly high, that cortisol surge doesn't ramp up gently,
It hits the system too early and too hard.
triggering an anxiety response that jolts you awake with a racing heart.
It's just astonishing. The ancients were observing the exact same biology. They were just describing the phenomena with poetry and metaphor instead of chemistry.
And we see similar depth in Ayurveda. They focus heavily on individual constitution, what they call the doshas.
Yes, Ayurveda recognizes that the sleep terrain is not one size fits all.
For example, if you have a constitutional imbalance in what they call Veda energy, your internal state is light, erratic, mobile, and cold.
At night, a Veda imbalance manifests as a hyperactive nervous system racing thoughts, anxiety, and highly fragmented sleep where you just toss and turn.
So what is the Ayurvedic terrain remedy for a Veda imbalance? It's not a sedative pill.
The remedy relies on opposite qualities. Vata needs heavy, warm, grounding inputs.
This translates to using heavy blankets, keeping the room slightly warmer, eating warm, easily digestible stews for dinner.
And engaging in self-massage with warm, heavy oils like sesame to physically calm the peripheral nervous system.
And what if your imbalance is Pitta?
Pitta energy is characterized by heat, sharpness, and intensity. A Pitta-driven sleep issue looks like waking up sweating, overheating in bed, and having a mind that is intensely locked onto solving a complex problem from the workday.
The terrain remedy for Pitta is cooling and releasing. A very cool bedroom, lightweight breathable sheets, and specific practices to release the emotional charge and frustration before lying down.
And when we align with these practices, what are we fundamentally building? In the yogic and Ayurvedic traditions, they refer to a concept called ojas.
Ojas is a beautiful concept. It is considered the deepest vital essence of the body, your ultimate reserve of resilience, immunity, and stability.
According to the tradition, ojas is primarily synthesized and replenished during the deepest phases of sleep.
Chronic sleep deprivation, or living in constant sympathetic overdrive, literally burns away your ojas.
To protect it, they develop practices like yoga nidra.
Yoga nidra is fascinating. It translates to yogic sleep, but you aren't actually asleep, right?
Correct. It is a systematic, guided practice of sensory withdrawal and deep physical relaxation.
By methodically relaxing the body while maintaining a sliver of conscious awareness, yoga nidra forcefully drives the nervous system out of sympathetic dominance and into profound parasympathetic restorative tone.
It is a brilliant tool for managing the transition into the anabolic state.
Okay, we have covered the cellular mechanisms and we have translated the ancient maps. But let's bring this down to the most practical, immediate level.
Rebuilding the terrain takes weeks, sometimes months.
If a listener is sitting there right now, deeply depleted, carrying a massive allostatic load, and completely out of sync with their rhythm, how can specific nutritional ingredients help bridge the gap while they work on fixing their lifestyle?
This requires us to establish a non-negotiable rule before we discuss any specific nutrients. You cannot supplement your way out of a degraded terrain.
Right. If you're drinking a pot of coffee at 4 p.m., eating a pizza at 10 p.m., and staring at an iPad, in a sealed hot room. There is no botanical extract or mineral on planet Earth that will magically fix your sleep.
Supplements and nutraceuticals are bridges. They are not foundations.
Exactly. But when used as bridges, while you are simultaneously fixing the light, the food, and the environment, specific ingredients from the research can be incredibly powerful allies in calming the nervous system.
The most foundational of these is magnesium.
Let's go deep on magnesium. I feel like it's the most recommended sleep supplement, but how does it actually induce relaxation at a cellular level?
It acts as a physical gatekeeper in the nervous system, specifically at the site of NMDA receptors.
NMDA receptors, so let's break that down.
Think of an NMDA receptor as a doorway on a brain cell that, when opened, allows calcium to rush in and excites the cell.
This is necessary for learning and memory. But if these doorways stay open too long, the nervous system becomes wildly overstimulated.
Glutamate, which is an excitatory neurotransmitter, is the key that opens this door.
So if my brain is flooded with stress, glutamate is running around opening all the doors, making my brain cells hyperactive. Where does magnesium come in?
Magnesium literally acts as the bouncer standing in the doorway of the NMDA receptor. Even if glutamate tries to open the door, a magnesium ion physically sits inside the channel, blocking the calcium from rushing in.
It prevents the overstimulation cascade.
Without adequate intracellular magnesium, your nervous system loses its ability to enforce relaxation. Your muscles twitch, your mind races, and your terrain stays rigid.
That is a brilliant mechanism. What about the people who say my body is tired, but I just can't shut my brain off to transition into sleep?
That is where specific amino acids and botanical extracts excel at neurological downshifting. L-theanine is a prime example.
It is a unique amino acid found naturally in green tea leaves.
But green tea has caffeine, which we just said is bad for sleep.
Right, which is why utilizing isolated L-theanine as an ingredient is so effective. L-theanine crosses the blood-brain barrier and has a direct impact on brainwave activity.
It significantly increases the production of alpha brainwaves.
Alpha waves are the ones associated with calm, focused relaxation, like when you're deep in meditation or staring peacefully at a campfire.
Exactly. It promotes a state of relaxed alertness without sedation. It helps quiet the mental chatter.
And when we look at traditional botanicals in the source documents, lemon balm is an extraordinary ally. It has been used for centuries to gently soothe the nervous system.
How does lemon balm work biologically?
It interacts with the GABA system. GABA is your brain's primary inhibitory neurotransmitter. It's the ultimate chill-out chemical.
Your brain naturally produces enzymes that break GABA down to prevent you from being too lethargic, right?
Yes. Lemon balm contains specific compounds, like rosmarinic acid, that mildly inhibit the enzyme responsible for destroying GABA.
So lemon balm doesn't necessarily force more GABA into the brain. It just stops the brain from cleaning up the GABA it already has, allowing that calming chemical to linger longer in the synapses.
Exactly. It extends the calming signal.
But we also have to address the chronic stress component. How do we stop the HPA axis, the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis, which is the body's central stress response system, from pumping out cortisol right when we are trying to sleep?
This is where the category of herbs known as adaptogens comes into play. And the name adaptogen is perfect because they help the body adapt to the terrain rather than just forcing a single reaction.
Adaptogens are fundamentally different from sedatives.
A sedative forces the central nervous system to slow down. An adaptogen buffers the physiological cost of stress, helping to normalize the system.
If your cortisol is too low in the morning, an adaptogen helps lift it. If your cortisol is too high at night, an adaptogen helps lower it.
Ashwagandha is perhaps the most heavily researched adaptogen in the world for this purpose.
What is ashwagandha actually doing in the body?
It directly interacts with the HPA axis to lower circulating levels of cortisol and DHEA in people experiencing chronic stress.
By actively reducing that background hum of stress chemistry, ashwagandha allows the natural circadian rhythm to reemerge.
It clears the path so that when darkness falls, melatonin doesn't have to fight against a tidal wave of cortisol.
And the sources also highlight tulsi, which is known as holy basil.
Tulsi is revered in Ayurvedic medicine as an elixir of life. Like ashwagandha, it provides profound support for the stress response.
But it also has unique protective effects against cellular stress and metabolic strain. It helps the terrain recover its natural flexibility and resilience.
And looking back at traditional Chinese medicine, the ingredient sources mention some traditional calmers that are totally food-based, like jujube dates and longan fruit.
Yes, these are deeply embedded in TCM. They are not powerful sedatives. They are considered deeply nourishing.
In TCM terminology, they are used to calm the shen, which translates roughly to the spirit or the mind.
When a person is deeply fatigued, emotionally unstable, and suffering from erratic sleep, TCM views this as a deficiency of blood and energy.
Jujube and longan are used to nourish the blood, feed the terrain, and create the stable, grounded conditions necessary for the shen to settle and rest.
They feed the terrain rather than forcing it into submission. And speaking of feeding the terrain, we have to touch on the structural components. We spent a lot of time talking about the brain's dishwasher, the glymphatic flow.
Right, the plumbing requires raw materials. To maintain the integrity of the extracellular matrix, the body relies on structural minerals like calcium and, as we discussed deeply, sulfur.
And in the ingredient context, that sulfur is often provided in the form of MSM, right?
Yes, methylsulfamylmethane. It is a highly bioavailable form of organic sulfur.
Supplying the body with adequate sulfur helps maintain those highly charged sulfate groups in the matrix,
ensuring the electrical pull remains strong enough to sweep the cerebrospinal fluid through the brain tissue.
When you look at all these ingredients, the magnesium blocking the NMDA receptors, the L-theanine boosting alpha waves, the lemon balm protecting GABA, the ashwagandha buffering cortisol, and the sulfur maintaining the physical matrix.
You realize this is a completely different paradigm of wellness.
We aren't taking a synthetic chemical to knock ourselves unconscious. We are systematically feeding the terrain the exact raw molecular materials it needs to execute its own brilliant, ancient programming.
That shift in mindset is the very essence of taking sovereignty over your health. You become the steward of your internal environment.
Okay, we have covered a massive amount of ground today, from the physics of light to the mechanics of brain fluid to the biochemistry of the gut. Before we close, let's briefly summarize the practical blueprint for you listening.
The blueprint is a commitment to biological rhythm. It starts with establishing a stable, consistent wake time every single day, regardless of how you slept the night before.
It demands that you get outside and expose your eyes to that massive lux volume of morning sunlight within the first hour of waking.
Setting the biological timer.
Yes. Then it requires protecting your evening sanctuary, dimming the lights, avoiding screens to protect the darkness imperative for melatonin release.
Curating a bedroom that is dark, quiet, cool, and critically well-ventilated to prevent CO2 accumulation.
And throughout the day, supporting the terrain with plant-forward, fiber-rich foods to send safety signals up the vagus nerve.
Utilizing daytime movement to pump the lymphatics.
Prioritizing emotional closure before bed and strategically using those targeted botanical and mineral bridges when the nervous system needs extra support to downshift.
And the most important takeaway is that this is a process. Rebuilding a degraded terrain takes 30 to 90 days of consistent signaling.
You are unwinding years, perhaps decades, of circadian mismatch and allostatic load.
You have to give your biology the time and the repetitive consistency it needs to finally trust its environment again.
Absolutely. One good day doesn't fix a decade of debt, but consistent deposits will eventually clear the balance.
This deep dive has been exhaustive, but it is really just your starting point.
If you want to continue your education and take control of these mechanisms, there are 3 incredible resources you should explore.
You can head over to healthfreedomradio.net for more deeply researched audio programs on these exact concepts.
You can visit wholehealthworldwide.com to deeply understand the broader whole health terrain framework we've been discussing today.
And you can check out targetedneeds.com for practical self-help resources to start applying this blueprint to your own life.
I want to leave you with one final provocative reflection to mull over as you prepare for bed tonight. For our entire lives, we have been conditioned to view the state of sleep as a daily death, an annoying blank space on our productivity calendar where absolutely nothing happens.
But I challenge you to view it through the lens of everything we've discussed today. Think of the sleep state as the most hyper-intelligent, metabolically active, and profoundly productive phase of your entire existence.
Consider this. What if the absolute most important, regenerative, and powerful thing you will do all day tomorrow actually begins the exact moment you close your eyes tonight?
Are you making deposits, or are you withdrawing funds?
Reclaim your night.
Thanks for listening to Health Freedom Radio with Jessica Steele and Jordan Fisher. We're glad you joined us, and we hope you enjoyed today's show. We'll leave you with this. Your future is yours to own, and we're here to run with you every step of the way. Let's build it together. Subscribe, stay connected, and share this with someone who's ready to level up their life.